Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jan Szerewiński. Protests in Serbia continue after the deadly roof collapse in the northern city of Novi Sad, which killed 15, including a child. Nearly 3 months later, the protesters are still demanding change, saying it was the, and I quote, corrupt government's fault. TVP World's Balkans correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski was there to witness the protests and has this report.
Crowds have gathered in the Serbian city of Novi Sad on Friday evening, and they have gathered near the city's railway station where a roof collapsed 3 months ago, tragically killing 15 people. And the crowd gathered here to commemorate those who were killed in this tragic accident, but also to take part in protests that are to be held on Saturday in Novi Sad. And these protests are to block 3 major bridges in the city. And this is the next in the series of ongoing protests that have been continuing for 3 months now since the accident happened. Protests that were initially largely unanswered to by the government, but finally eventually began to take effect. The effect this week was the Prime Minister's resignation and also a major reshuffle of the government. However, the protesters are not satisfied, and during Saturday's protest, they will make their voice and dissatisfaction heard even louder. From Novi Sad, Serbia, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
And TVP World will make sure to keep you updated on the situation in Serbia. We'll be coming back to our Balkans correspondents throughout the day. One of the potential outcomes of the protests could be an expert-run government. That is according to Vujo Ilic, a research fellow at the University of Belgrade. Speaking to TVP World, Ilic once again pointed out that what the protesting students are also demanding is the criminal accountability of the current government.
They demanded accountability, and they're also demanding criminal responsibility for what happened in Novi Sad, as well as transparency in the money flows and the construction documents, which means that it takes time for these demands to be fulfilled. Right now, what we are all wondering is, how will the students actually evaluate this? Legal procedures take time. We all understand this, and so it's a big question. How long can this movement maintain this momentum, knowing that the legal process can take weeks, months, or even years?
Do you expect to see more political change at the top, more resignations, even if it's not precisely what the students are calling for?
Actually, yes. Prime Minister resigned on Tuesday, and on Monday, the President Vučić announced government reshuffle. So even though this resignation of Prime Minister was sudden, we all expected that there would be a major reshuffle of the government, and the President Vučić was announcing 50% of the cabinet would be replaced. What could be expected is that more ministers would form this government outside of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, which means that we could look ahead for some sort of expert-run government, similar to the previous Prime Minister, Ana Brnabić, who became a prime minister in 2017 and to 2019, she wasn't a member of the ruling party. We might actually expect something like that to happen again.
Georgians also took to the streets of the capital city, Tbilisi, on Friday night. They marched from several parts of the city towards the parliament. The protest was organized in solidarity with the people arrested during the anti-government demonstrations which took place in late 2024. The aforementioned protests erupted in response to Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze's announcement that Georgia would delay accession negotiations with the European Union until 2028. According to local human rights groups, some 400 people have been detained during the protests, many of whom have been physically abused and denied medical care. The UN has also published a report calling on the government to investigate allegations of excessive force and torture by police. Earlier this week, Brussels suspended visa-free travel to the EU for Georgian diplomats and officials, citing the violent repression by Georgian authorities against peaceful protesters, politicians and independent media. Russian missiles have hit the southern Ukrainian port city of Odesa. A hotel in the historic city center was damaged. 7 people were wounded in the strike. In his address last night, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine needs more air defense to prevent such situations from happening.
Work is ongoing in the south of our country, in Odesa, after Russian missile strikes. Preliminary reports indicate that ballistic missiles were used. These were strikes directly on the city, on ordinary civilian buildings. Again, air defense remains our top priority. We are working with all our partners to better protect our state. Today I held a staff meeting. Many reports were presented on the supplies to our troops, our weapons, all purchases and contracts. Everything is in place. The supplies are there. We need to speed up deliveries and increase the supply of weaponry that will help us save more lives, our soldiers and our people. More orders for drones, more investments in the developing of robotic systems, and more deliveries of basic weapons. All the necessary instructions have been given. Our industry has the potential. Countries, especially in Europe, are ready to cooperate with Ukraine and invest in our defense production.
The US president has told reporters that he will definitely impose tariffs on American ally, the European Union. On Saturday, President Trump is expected to sign an order that will place 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican products and 10% on Chinese imports.
Am I going to impose tariffs on the European Union? Do you want the truthful answer, or should I give you a political answer? Absolutely. Absolutely. The European Union has treated us so terribly. But the tariffs are going to make us very rich and very strong, and we're going to treat other countries very fairly. But if you think about it, other countries charge us tariffs. We don't charge them tariffs, and it's about time that that changes.
And we're staying in the United States. A small medical transport plane crashed into a Philadelphia neighborhood on Friday night. No survivors have been found so far in the ongoing rescue operation. The plane carrying 4 crew members, a child patient and his mother crashed into several buildings in northeast Philadelphia, leaving behind a fiery path of destruction. Several people on the ground have been injured. The child on board the plane received care in the US for a life-threatening condition and was returning to Mexico. Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker said city officials do not know the number of fatalities, but the city is asking for prayers for anyone and everyone that may have been affected. And now we're taking you live to the Gaza Strip with images of Hamas militants who are there in connection with the prisoner exchange taking place in accordance to the recent deal between the terror group Hamas and Israel. Israel has confirmed that it has received 2 of the hostages that were handed over by the militants earlier today, with the 3rd hostage expected to be transferred later in the morning. Ofer Calderon, a French-Israeli dual national, and Yarden Bibas were seen being handed over to Red Cross officials in southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis. Later on, Israel has confirmed that they were transferred to Israeli officials. What is known also is that the 3rd hostage, Keith Sigel, is expected to be handed over in another location later today. He's a father of 2 of the youngest hostages in the entire situation, 2 children that were taken hostage along with their mother and were reportedly killed during an airstrike later on. The deal will have more hostages being released later on during the first phase. The total number of Israeli hostages to be released is expected to be more than 30 Israelis in exchange for numerous Palestinian hostages. Now we're moving on to our next story. A former Polish justice minister is facing a 30-day detention over his refusal to testify before a committee investigating a spyware scandal some have called Poland's Watergate. Zbigniew Ziobro is the latest in a series of conservative ex-government officials attempting to evade prosecution. Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
The center-liberal government of Donald Tusk is accusing Poland's former Minister of Justice, Zbigniew Ziobro, of using the highly sophisticated Pegasus spyware against prominent opposition figures during the rule of the conservative Law and Justice administration.
Nie ma takiej możliwości.
The times of Zbigniew Ziobro running the show are over. We won't be puppets in his own show any longer.
Czasu Zbigniew Ziobro.
As the committee investigating the scandal was convening in Parliament on Friday, the ex-Minister of Justice Zbigniew Ziobro was giving an interview to a private right-wing TV station. On the order of the court, the police showed up to deliver him to the committee for questioning. But the committee had no intention of waiting for the former official any longer. They closed the proceedings after filing for a 30-day detention of the former minister.
Cowards in the committee shut it down before I got there.
The deputy chairman of the committee says the former minister is like a kettle calling the pot black.
Mr. Ziobro, under different excuses, avoided hearings of our commission since June last year. He avoided it 5 times.
Members of the conservative opposition claim it's all smoke and mirrors.
If they use force, he would like to be present here. Then, as you can see, they simply run. So I think that this is only political theater.
But Zbigniew Ziobro is not the only former government official to avoid questioning. One of his closest advisors, ex-Deputy Justice Minister Marcin Romanowski, recently fled to Hungary, claiming he wouldn't be treated fairly by the justice system he once represented himself. A judge who often worked with Ziobro's aides also defected, but to Belarus, a totalitarian country under Russian control. The investigative committee, on the other hand, says the evidence speaks for itself.
Pegasus system, which is highly sophisticated system to be used by law agencies against terrorists, against kidnappers, etc., was used against members of the opposition during Law and Justice government times. And it was used against judges, it was used against journalists, it was used against many people who were treated as enemies.
It is now up to the Polish courts to decide whether to detain the former justice minister for 30 days, as requested by the investigative committee. Whether the Polish former Minister of Justice Zbigniew Ziobro actually gets temporary detention or not, this case is bound to continue to stir emotions, especially here on the corridors of the Polish parliament. While there have been no convictions just yet, the investigations continue. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
And with this, we conclude this news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.